Let's talk a little bit about the nature of desire from, now don't get freaked out, a quantum physics point of view. Oh my God, this is going to talk about physics. I don't want to listen. Just relax. You're going to enjoy this.
When we look around us, even at our own bodies, what we see is the tip of the iceberg. We could say the classical tip of an immense quantum mechanical iceberg.
Everything in the universe is energy. Your body's energy. The room you're living in is energy. Everything you want is energy.
And that's not a new idea. A fuzzy-haired guy in 1925 wrote on his chalkboard, E equals mc squared. And we couldn't grasp what that meant. What that says is on one side of the equation is mass and light and everything that we perceive, but it all equals energy. Everything is energy. And let me help you understand that just a little bit. There's the universe, of course, and our galaxy, and our planet, and then individuals, and then inside of this body are organ systems, and then there's cells, and then there's molecules, and then there's atoms, and then there is energy. So there are a lot of levels to talk about something on, but when you get down to it, everything is energy.
There's enough energy sitting in there, in one atom, to do amazing things, to possibly even open up the doorways to lighting an entire city.
Think of this for a moment. Take your hand and look at it. Now your hand looks solid, but it's really not. If you put it under a proper microscope, you'd see a mass of energy vibrating.
And so everything is made up of the exact same thing, whether it's your hand, whether it's the ocean, or whether it's a star. The colored paper with ink on it is not money. It's just energy. And so part of the illusion that we're living in is that, these things are solid. They're not solid. Neither is a piece of wood, neither is a rock.
Get the proper microscope and go and look at a wall. That wall is not solid. That wall is a mass of energy in a very high speed of vibration.
It feels solid because of the vibration, the rate at which the molecules are vibrating.
Everything in the universe vibrates. In other words, everything moves. We live in an ocean of motion.
You are vibrational beings in a vibrational universe.
Many people are not yet ready to acknowledge that they are vibrational. They prefer to see themselves as blood and bone specimens that they see in the mirror. And we want to remind you that everything that you observe with your physical senses is vibrational interpretation. In other words, you hear because your ears translate vibration. You see because your eyes translate vibration. You smell because your nose translates vibration. Your fingertips are translating vibration. Your tongue is translating vibration. All of your senses are about the translation of vibration, and that's why you are able to perceive your environment in the way that you do.
So it's very difficult for us as scientists or engineers or medical doctors or anybody to come to terms with the fact that what our senses are telling us is really not the whole story.
We've been so taught to live with our physical senses, hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. But our physical senses lie. Our physical senses don't tell us the truth.
If you only judge by your sensory factors, you'd believe the sun took a bath in the ocean every night and burrowed through the earth and was reborn on the eastern shore the next morning. I mean, the ancients used to believe that, but now you know better than that. If you judged only by your sensory factors, you'd believe that train tracks met in the distance. But you know better than that, and you turn away from your senses. If you lived only by your sensory factors, you'd believe that a dog whistle made no sound. But you know better than that, so you turn away from your sensory factors and you stand out in your yard and you blow away. And yet how many times, if we're not careful, do we find ourselves living at nothing more than the sensory level?
If we take a look at everything in the universe, we know from a scientific perspective is made up of something called energy. So what do we know about the properties of energy? Number one, all energy has a vibration. All energy has a vibration. It emits a frequency.
We are frequency generators. If you get close to someone's skin, you can feel infrared energy being given off. If you look at them, you're seeing light energy given off. We now have scans where you can put a machine around somebody's head instead of putting the electrodes on their head, and perceive and record the energy that their brain is giving off.
The most potent form of energy, by the way, is thought. It penetrates all space and all time. Every thought has a frequency. We can measure a thought. What most people don't understand is a thought has a biochemical and bioelectrical property. Every thought, which means it has a frequency. And so if you're thinking that thought over and over and over again, or if you're imagining in your mind, okay, having that brand new car, having the money that you need, building that company, finding your soulmate, if you imagine what that looks like, you're emitting that frequency on a consistent basis. Our job as humans is to hold on to the thoughts of what we want, make it absolute clear in our minds what we want, and from that we start to invoke one of the greatest laws in the universe.
You've probably been sitting there wondering, what is the secret? I'll tell you how I have come to understand.
To a liquid, and that's what we're going to witness here today. This is a water droplet that you're going to see, and in this water droplet, a frequency is being pumped into this water droplet. As the frequency is mirrored in the droplet, you'll actually see the geometric patterns in that droplet. Now what's happening, and the reason that this is so significant, is because we're going to do a frequency sweep. We're going to go from low frequencies to higher frequencies. And what you'll find is this. You'll see that in the lower frequencies, the patterns are less complex. And in the higher frequency, the patterns are more complex. So we're going through a sweep from lower to higher frequency. I'm sharing this with you now because Earth is essentially going through a frequency sweep. Our fundamental pulse, our base pulse that has hovered around 7.8 cycles per second, now is changing. And again, there's a lot of controversy about what the change is, and we're witnessing the change. As we go through our planetary shift of this pulse, patterns of energy must change to respond to that, just as patterns of energy in this water are changing to respond to this pulse. And we'll begin with simply the concentric patterns in the water. As the frequency begins, every once in a while we'll reach a key threshold resonance, such as that moment right there. And in that key threshold resonance, the entire pattern morphed into a more complex expression of itself, simply because the frequency changed. Now watch what happens. The frequency is still increasing. And watch what happens. As we reach another key threshold resonance, this entire pattern will morph into a beautifully and more complex pattern of itself, again and again. And look at this pattern right here. Look what you're seeing right here. Look at the beautiful geometry. Here is a perfect cube. There's a perfect tetrahedron, a star tetrahedron. In 2 dimensions, we've got the octahedron. Very powerful images of sacred geometry held in place simply because we've achieved the vibratory pattern that allows that in this water droplet. And as the vibration increases, these patterns will become more and more complex. You can see the pulse from where you are. Can you see the pulse actually in the water? As we go into the last set of the frequencies, what you'll see is that the entire, and you'll watch along the outer perimeter, the entire pattern reaches its greatest level of complexity, and then it goes back. As the frequencies drop, it goes back to what it was, the concentric circles, as it was originally. It almost looks alive. You know, you've been offered many times the concept that thought is vibration. Have you ever considered that emotion is vibration? Feeling is vibration. We are always feeling something. We are always emoting something. We may not always be aware of what that is. We carry those patterns with us. As we hold a feeling and an emotion, what we're doing is we are holding a vibratory pattern in the liquid crystal of our bodies.
Ultimately, what we'd like to see is, what is the physics of consciousness? We can ask that question today. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? What are the origins of consciousness? What are the limits of human potential? We're in a position to actually answer that now, I believe, although there's certainly not consensus yet in the scientific community about that. But with the real cutting-edge knowledge, the discovery of the unified field, the so-called superstring field, we now understand that life is fundamentally one. At the basis of all life's diversity, there is unity. At our basis, you and I are one. And that unity, at the basis of mind and matter, is consciousness, universal consciousness. So with that deep understanding that consciousness isn't created by the brain, it's not purely an outcome of molecular chemical processes in the brain, but is fundamental in nature. It's the very core of nature. We call it the unified field. Now that we have that foundational understanding of what consciousness is, we can solve the mind-body problem. We can see how consciousness percolates up through our physiology to become the consciousness that we experience and see, and sensory perception and all of that. So there is a foundation now to really link rigorously neuroscience with quantum physics. Progress in our understanding of the universe through physics over the past quarter century has been exploring deeper levels of natural law, from the macroscopic to the microscopic, from the molecular to the atomic to the nuclear to subnuclear levels of nature's functioning, so-called electroweak unified scale, grand unified scale, super unified scale. And what we've discovered at the core basis of the universe, the foundation of the universe, is a single universal field of intelligence, a field which unites gravity with electromagnetism, light, with radioactivity, with the nuclear force, so that all the forces of nature and all the so-called particles of nature, quarks, leptons, protons, neutrons, are now understood to be one. They're all just different ripples on a single ocean of existence. That's called the unified field or superstring field, and it's a mathematical tour de force. But we have realized Einstein's dream. He dedicated half of his life to discovering this unified field, and now in the context of the superstring, that has been achieved. So unified field theories based on the superstring identify a single universal field of intelligence, an ocean of existence, at the basis of everything, mind and matter. And all the so-called particles of the universe, the forces in our universe, everything in the universe are just ripples on that ocean of existence. That's the unified field. And that field is a non-material field. It is ultimately the field of consciousness. And all our separate consciousness, wherever there's consciousness, is merely consciousness by virtue of the fact that my consciousness, your consciousness, are ultimately that. Everything in the universe is really nothing but that. Planets, trees, people, animals, we're all just waves of vibration of this underlying unified superstring field. We are really united at our core. And ultimately the understanding that's emerging will be that there is only one consciousness in this room. And it is you. And it is me. And it is each and every one of us. We individualize our consciousness through the filter of our nervous system. But the consciousness itself, our very inner subjectivity, the self in the big sense, that is universal. And knowing that, knowing it through experience, is called enlightenment, and has been called enlightenment through the ages. But quantum mechanics, even at the molecular level, let alone atomic, nuclear, subnuclear, in the realm of quantum mechanics, the idea of particle is replaced by the idea of wave function. And what is a wave function? Technically, it's a vector in a linear space. Well, what's a vector in a linear space? What's it made of? What's the substance of nature? Well, a wave function, a vector in a linear space, is made of the same stuff thoughts are made of. We're really living in a thought universe, a conceptual universe. Quantum mechanics is just the play and display of potentiality. So the point I'm making is the deeper you go in the structure of natural law, the less material, the less inert, the less dead the universe is, the more alive, the more conscious the universe becomes. Then when you get to the foundation of the universe, the unified field or superstrength field, it's simply a field of pure being, pure intelligence. Intelligence because it's the fountainhead of all the laws of nature, all the fundamental forces, all the fundamental particles, all the laws governing life at every level of the universe have their unified source in the unified field.
What we feel has now been scientifically shown to be provable. And what you're going to see now are what happens to particles of sand and other various particles when a sound resonates across a plate and resonates those particles in tune with the sound. Because when we think, we're not just sending out a wave which resonates the energy, we're sending out on a frequency outside of the range of human hearing, we're sending out a sound. Everything is sound. When we think a sound goes out, it resonates the energy around us to that sound. And what you're about to see are some pictures that show this happening when sound is introduced, and how sound takes random particles and turns it into astonishing form. And that's how this universe was created. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sound. So what you're looking at here is merely particles formed into patterns by sound. They were all over the place to start with, just in random positions on the plate. As soon as the sound appears, they form into these patterns, because everything is sound. And it is sound that turns matter and energy into form. Patterns on wings of birds and insects are all the manifestation of the sound vibrations. Every organ in our body resonates to a certain frequency. And when our thoughts and emotions and stress and the vibrations that causes de-harmonize the vibrational state of our various parts of our body, we become ill. We think ourselves into illness because we're affecting the vibrational state of the body. And so every time you think and feel, you're resonating a frequency which is making the energy around you resonate to the same frequency. What you give out is what you create. Here you're seeing mini galaxies just formed by particles and sound. This is how the galaxies and the universe and the solar systems were formed and continue to be held in the structure they're in through sound. If the sound changes, the matter changes, the energy changes. So when you look at what it says in texts like even the Old Testament, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sound. And sound is everything. When you think and feel, you create in sound. This is how the heart beats at a certain resonance. All you're looking at here are interacting frequencies making a beat. And so while the frequency of the heart is at the right level, it beats in the normal number of beats a minute. But when we become stressed, we affect that frequency and the heart beats faster. And so everything is sound, even the human heartbeat, and the interacting frequencies that make it happen. And we've seen the galaxies, and now here are the planets forming, just on a plate from particles caused by sound passing through them. This planet has a resonant frequency. It's called the Schumann cavity resonance. But basically, while that frequency holds, the planet will hold its present form. If the frequency changes, the form will change. It's the same with everything. And here you see sound being passed through ion filings and particles, and therefore creating form once again. And from these pictures, it's hardly difficult to see how the human body is formed through sound resonating energy, and how that physical form is held as long as that sound matrix is held. But once that changes, the physical body changes. So there you've seen, with stunning effect, how sound creates form, how galaxies are created, how planets are created. And all those planets, balls of particles, all those revolving galaxies were merely particles turned into that form by sound.